Timor. What are you doing in here? Do you have any idea what you're doing to me? You killed my brother with electrical shocks.
This man is a war criminal.
Your name is Gui Campos. You're a notorious spy.
We know it.
How can you sit here having a coffee when she is living in misery?
He knows it.
Man, you need to answer you.
Yet Gui Campos lives in our community, a free man.
How did you get into this country?
This country is free.
Yes, this
Yeah,
country
I'm
is
free man too.
He walks the same streets as the families who've suffered by his hands.
He can just kill somebody, especially an innocent young boy, and come to Australia, sit, dine, drink, as if nothing has happened.
How? Why? Simple. Our federal government has blundered, ignored and failed in its duty to the extent that it's a crime itself.
The Department of Immigration's handling of the case has been characterized by evasion, extreme evasion.
To prove it, we went to Dili with the former principal analyst on East Timor for the Australian Defence Force, Dr. Clinton Fernandez. It wasn't long before immigration's bluff was uncovered. Well, we've been in Timor for one day and we've managed to find what the Australian government says doesn't exist. Court documents and clear evidence that Gui Campos tortured to death an 11-year-old child. In statements on the 9th and 18th of September, the Department of Immigration said they gave Gui Campos a visa because he had no convictions and had not been subject to formal charges. The discovery of this document, however, clearly shows that statement to be false.
The court documents you found are very significant. They show that, in fact, he did torture and kill an 11-year-old child. And in fact, if you were able to find it within the first day, indeed the first hour, what's taken the government so long?
The doctor said to Ita, he killed the child and then he wants me to revive the child.
Joanna has every right to be angry at the authorities. The little boy in the court documents listed as tortured to death was her brother, Francisco Ximenez.
I want him to rot in hell.
Instead, he lives freely in Australia, and all the while the Minister for Immigration feels no need to explain by way of an interview, preferring statements that say the department's screening for war criminals is among the best in the world, and that Mr. Campos was checked against a wide range of source material, but subject those sources to scrutiny and the statement falls apart.
They have cited sources that do not exist or are irrelevant to the issue of war criminals entering Australia.
The Department of Immigration states Gui was checked against international tribunals. This is false.
There has never been an international tribunal for East Timor.
They go on to say Gui was also checked against the International Court of Justice.
The International Court of Justice hears proceedings between states. It doesn't involve the issue of international criminal law. It has no connection whatsoever to the crimes against humanity committed during the occupation of East Timor.
And then immigration refers to the UN Special Commission of Inquiry in East Timor 2006. This is irrelevant to Gui Campos.
It has no connection at all to the crimes against humanity committed during the occupation.
If the Australian government really wanted to use legitimate sources to find war criminals, they would come here. In front of me, 8,000 victim statements listing the perpetrators of many human rights atrocities and war crimes. This information was delivered to the Australian government in 2006 in this report, the Commission for Reception, Truth and Reconciliation in Timor. And yet, the Department of Immigration has never used it as one of their sources. If they did, they would find people like Gui Campos.
Based on the evidence I have seen, there are clear and compelling grounds to arrest Gui Campos and not allow him to leave the country. He must face justice here.
If he doesn't, Clinton says it's unlikely Gui Campos will ever be brought to account in Timor.
The Australian government's own AusAid website makes it clear that East Timor's justice system is seriously inadequate. And in fact, you just walk around the town and you'll see that the country is actually in a transition from occupation to independence. 80% of the infrastructure was destroyed by the withdrawing Indonesian army. There are burnt-out buildings everywhere. They simply do not have the resources to prosecute war criminals.
What Timor lacks in resources, Australia seems to lack in will. We keep telling the government about Gui Campos and the war crimes he committed in East Timor. They keep ignoring us. Surely they can't ignore this. 30 years on, heartbroken families finally embrace all that remains of their children. They say the man responsible is Gui Campos.
Yeah. I think he's not a good man. He's not a good guy. He's a bad guy because he was actually involved in taking other people's life.
Florencio Alves is lucky to be alive. He was part of a group of East Timorese captured by the Indonesian military in the town of Barique. He was spared, but he watched as Gui Campos singled out 9 people for extermination. His story is backed up by Jamie Meyer.
Gui Campos' role within that unit was that he was a person that had so much influence in terms of deciding someone's fate. If he wants this person to live, this person would live. If he wants that person to die, that person dies.
Jamie Meyer understood Gui's power more than most. He was communications officer for the Indonesian military and privy to sensitive material transmitted between commanders and subordinates. He has first-hand information about Gui Campos, who he describes as an enthusiastic participant in the abuse of civilians.
Gui Campos had so much influence at that time that if he wanted those 9 people to live, of course they'll live.
But Gui decided otherwise. All 9 were executed, leaving family members with a lifetime of sorrow. Jamie Meyer led a delegation to exhume the remains from the massacre site. Today they have been returned to Dili, where families will find a resting place for their loved ones. Back in Australia, however, Joanna Ximenez will find no rest for as long as Gui Campos walks the streets a free man.
I want this guy to pay for what he did to my brother.
Joanna wants the Attorney-General to prosecute Gui Campos in Australia for interrogating, torturing and killing her brother. She echoes Clinton's claim that war criminals do not face justice in Timor. She's right. Gui was sentenced to 3 years for killing her brother 30 years ago, but he never served his time.
In fact, he was able to go across the border and get himself acquitted. This should come as no surprise, because the whole point of the judicial system at the time was to give people a shield from a real trial.
A real trial is possible here, but the Attorney-General's Department has told us there isn't much evidence. Our visit to Timor suggests the evidence is overwhelming.
Gui Campos was there, as I remember, Gui Campos was there during the first night and second night.
Jose Bello was personally tortured and interrogated by Gui Campos over the course of 3 nights in 1995 in a cell in Dili.
It seems like your heart's going to be stopped or whatever, and then you feel your body's shake or all over.
After electric shock treatment, Jose was kicked and punched by Gui, and then subject to water torture. This treatment is a clear breach of the Torture Convention. The government has known about Jose for at least 2 weeks, but still no one has interviewed him except Today Tonight.
Gui Campos was Indonesian intelligence officer, and I don't know his position, but he was the one who always interrogated me when they captured me.
Author Naldo Ray was tortured by Gui at the Indonesian military headquarters in 1992. Paulo Amaral was tortured by Gui Campos in 1996. Leon Guzmão was tortured by Gui Campos in 1995. Gui Campos has perpetrated war crimes across the length and breadth of East Timor. Just in the last 2 days, we have found enough witnesses to pack a courtroom. And yet the Labor government, which strikes heroic poses about their multi-million-dollar commitment to justice, has taken no steps to interview any of the victims, even when we have supplied investigating authorities with specific contact details. The government really should match their words with actions. If they don't, Gui Campos will make a mockery of their professed claim to justice.
This is a very important issue of principle. It's an issue about bringing people to justice if they have committed terrible crimes.
That was Nicola Roxon from the Labor Party when they were in opposition.
I don't want people who are fleeing from those sorts of circumstances overseas and trying to make a new life here in Australia to find that they're going to run into at the shops someone who was actually perpetrating that violence against them.
Minister, that's exactly what happened to Joanna Ximenez. You now have the power of government to do something about it. Please do.
If Gui Campos is allowed to leave the country, it will send a message that Australia is a safe haven for war criminals.